Good morning. What a morning we're having together, huh? Four people's stories. I'm just so excited and grateful for them and their willingness to share and get baptized here in a service. It's just been amazing. We had two earlier, and now we had these four. It's been really, really great. In case I didn't introduce myself earlier, my name is Tom. I'm one of the pastors here, and we are in part 3 of a message series called Broken Heroes. We've been taking a look at some of these major characters, these major people from the scriptures, and just investigating their stories, see what's going on with them, because many of them, if not all of them, they have flaws. They're not perfect. They're human beings just like you and I, and they make mistakes, and there's something for us to learn there. In week 1, Lou took a look at David, who was once a shepherd boy and became a king, and as a king, he made a major, major blunder that cost him a lot and really changed things. And then, if you want, go back and check out those messages online and you can catch up. Last week we had a guy named Greg Lee come in. He's a pastor at a church in Indiana. He spoke about actually David's son, Solomon, who became king and was super wealthy, and he made a real mess of things, and he just chased every avenue and found that there was nothing of true substance there. So check those out. Now this week, we're taking a look at one of probably the most famous people in all of Scripture. He's actually famous not just within Christianity, he's famous within Judaism as well. He's mentioned even in the Quran, so even Islam makes mention of this guy. And he was a prophet for the people of God, as in he spoke for God or through God, used him to speak to the people of Israel, the Hebrews, the Jewish nation. He was a leader. He did incredible things. His story is filled with tension and conflict, and you can read about him in the book of Exodus. But we're actually going to we have to start way before that in actually the book of Genesis with the calling of a guy named Abraham. So Abraham was reached out to by God. God got a hold of him and said, hey, I'm going to make you the father of many nations, which was tricky because he had no kids. Can't be the father without kids. So eventually he has a son named Isaac. And then Isaac has a son named Jacob. And Jacob his story is really fascinating. He was kind of a cheater and a schemer. But he, at one point, has this encounter with God. And God's like, I'm going to give you a new name. I'm going to call you Israel. And that was essentially the birth of the nation, but not necessarily the political nation that we know today, but the people of Israel. And eventually, Jacob himself has many sons, and his favorite one was his last one, Joseph. And his brothers, they did not like that. Now, these people, right? So Abraham and his family, Isaac, his family, Jacob, his family, and even Joseph, all of these guys were meant to be the people that belonged to God. Not a God that was carved from stone or wood or anything else, but of Jehovah, of Yahweh, this invisible God who loves and speaks to his people. They were supposed to be the people that carried this faith. Unfortunately, they didn't always live up to it, and his brothers did not live up to that, and they sold Joseph into slavery because they hated him. They didn't want to kill him. Well, they kind of did, but they didn't end up killing him. They sold him into slavery, and for years, he was a slave, and he worked, but he was an incredible dude who'd made the most of every opportunity. Eventually, he was so, just well put together and so successful, he actually became the number 2 ranking person in all of Egypt, which was really fortunate because the people of Israel, in a totally different area, suffered a great famine. And because of Joseph's success, he was able to bring his people into the land of Egypt where they were foreigners, and they survived and actually thrived. And for a time, it was wonderful. God took Joseph's terrible situation and turned it all around for the benefit of his people. But as time went on, things started to change. And we'll pick up that story right here at the beginning of Exodus after the end of the book of Genesis. It says this: Now Joseph and all of his brothers and all of that generation died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They were good at having babies. So numerous were they that the land was filled with them. They're not in their home turf. They're in Egypt, and they're flourishing. And it's going really, really well for them. Except, continuing on, then a new king to whom Joseph, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, all of their family, they meant nothing to this new king who came into power in Egypt. And he looks at them and goes, you know what? They are very numerous. I bet if they were wanting to, they could possibly overthrow us and keep this land and this everything for themselves. So he creates a plot where he's like, you know what, we're going to make them slaves. And then it went all throughout the land. Now all of these Israelites who were living well, flourishing in Egypt, become slaves to the Egyptian people. And he makes them work hard in the fields. He makes them into masons. They have to build bricks to build the cities and the temples and the things that the Pharaoh wants. But it's not enough for him. He's still concerned about them. So he makes this decree. He makes this law. And it says this. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile. But let every girl live. He wanted to decimate their ability to fight, to rise up in power. He wanted to make sure that these Israelite people would stay down. So all male boys were to be thrown into the river to be killed. And it's in this situation, full of tension and struggle and suffering, that the person we're looking at, our hero for today, is born. He's born to a Hebrew set of parents, and he's healthy. And his mom decided to not go through with this, but rather keep him secret. For 3 months, she raised him secretly, until the point where he got bigger and louder, as babies are often loud, and she couldn't keep him secret anymore. So she devised this plan to take him, put him in a basket, and put him right in the reeds of the Nile, right near the palace. And she has her daughter, the boy's sister, watch from a little distance. And that's where we pick it up. It says this: Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. Continuing, she opened it and saw the baby. She realized this is not a newborn. This is not like a baby like that. This baby has got a couple months of life in him. And he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. She knew that somebody had to hide this child and raised him so far. She felt compassion that this person is going through this, and she felt compassion for this baby. She said, this is one of the Hebrew babies. This baby shouldn't be here. So the sister walks up to her. And continuing, then the child's sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? The Pharaoh's daughter was not her mom. She couldn't nurse the baby. Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the boy's mother. What a turn of events. So Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. Continuing, when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter. The mother took him to Pharaoh's daughter. He became her son, and she named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. Now, I think for a lot of us, we know the story of Moses. He's been represented in the Ten Commandments by Charlton Heston. He's been in The Prince of Egypt, that animated movie, right? He's talked about, he's known. But I want us to think about the story totally fresh, okay? If you were in his mother's shoes and you had maybe 3 or 4 years to nurse this boy before handing him off, you had 3 or 4 years to raise him, how would you have treated those 3 or 4 years? I bet you would have done the same thing she did. Taught him everything she could about his identity, because she knew that he was going to be handed off and become basically an Egyptian prince. She's like, you must trust Yahweh, trust Jehovah, our God, just like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and all of these people. You must put your faith in him, not in the gods of Egypt. Put your faith in our God. Don't forget who you are. Now you have to keep it secret. You can't tell anybody that you are a Hebrew, that you come from this line of people of faith. But you have to keep it secret. But never forget who you are. And then after 3 or 4 years, she hands this baby off to the daughter of Pharaoh. And now he goes to live in the palace, in the hall of Pharaoh, as one of the daughter's sons. And time passes, decades passes. He may be we're going to pick up his story when he's probably between 30 and 40 years old, where he's been educated. He's been trained. He's lived a life of luxury, especially compared to the people of Israel, especially compared to his family, his cousins, his friends, the people he maybe knew as a young boy. He's living in a palace. They're living in who knows what, and they're working day after day for Pharaoh. And that's where we pick up this story. It says, one day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. He saw the suffering, the slavery that they were stuck in, that they were helpless to get out of. And it says this, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Again, the author of this book highlights or mentions, he didn't highlight this, he mentions that it was one of his own people. And all of this stuff started to come to a head for Moses. He could no longer just sit there and live in this palace and be a prince of Egypt when deep down he knew for sure he was a son of Israel. He belonged to this people, and he's watching one of the Egyptians beat one of his people, and it's too much for him. And the story continues, and he says, looking this way and that way and seeing no one, as in, is there anyone going to step in, or is anyone going to see what I'm about to do? He takes matters into his own hands, and he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And Moses thinks that he got away with it. The next day, after all this has transpired, he goes back out to the terrace where he looked down upon what happened here with the Egyptian and the Hebrew person. And he sees two Hebrew men fighting. And he's like, what are these guys doing? The people of Israel are already enslaved. Why are they fighting? So he goes down and says, what are you doing? Why are you fighting with one of your brothers? And one of the guys turns to him and is like, who made you judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed that guy yesterday? And immediately Moses backs off and goes, whoa, what I thought was kept secret is no secret. People are finding out what I did. And then Pharaoh hears about it. It says this, next slide. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled. This secret Israelite living in the palace of Pharaoh, who ate probably at the table of Pharaoh at some point, betrays all of his education, all of these years in Pharaoh's care, kills an Egyptian, one of his other citizens, to protect a Hebrew person, and Pharaoh wants this guy dead. He wants Moses dead. So Moses leaves. But how? How did this come to be? What happened here? Did Moses think that morning where he's like, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go look at my people and I'm going to become a murderer. No, he thought of all of the stuff his mom had taught him and thought of all of the faith of the people that went before him, and it rose up in him. What we saw on display there was his desire for the good of his own people. But somehow things got out of hand. Somehow it went too far. Somehow his passion, this burning feeling for his people, went too far, and his desire for the good of his own people led to him being a murderer. It got out of hand. It went way too far. He didn't wake up that day thinking, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go kill someone today. No, he thought, how can I best help my people? And when he went to go help, it took him way past where he wanted to go. You see, that feeling he had is a good one. On the inside of him was a good notion, a good desire. But somehow, the execution of that desire led to a bad outcome. What was good on the inside came out in a bad way. And what's really surprising is that while we cannot relate to the circumstances that Moses was in, we can very easily relate to this idea. There are times in our lives where we have the most noble, God wholesome, level desire, and then when it comes time to actually do the thing, instead of loving the people we want to love, we hurt them. Instead of taking care of the thing we want to take care of, it goes terribly. This is something we've all experienced. This is something I experienced, and I'm always like, why? How did it go from being a wholesome, noble desire to be ending up this way? This happens to me all the time as a parent. Like, I want the best for my kids, but sometimes I feel like I'm gonna have to pay their therapy bill. My daughter is, she's 4 years old, and she's awesome. I love her to death. She's so cute and amazing and fun. But she just does things. Like she'll touch things and whatever, and always I'm like, use your words. Like, come on, just ask before you just grab stuff. She's just loves to go out and play and be totally dangerous. I'm always like, oh my gosh, this kid's gonna, I don't know, just get hurt, right? So I'm always like, Amelia, make sure when you go outside, you wear a helmet when you ride your bike. And when you're, going up and down the stairs, make sure you hold the railing. The first thing you want to do, Amelia, when you get in the car is put your arms through your car seat so I can buckle you. Amelia, when you're eating food at the table, make sure you chew with your mouth closed and not talk because you're probably going to choke. Amelia, please eat over your dish. Like, the food's going to hit the floor. Like, if it hits your plate, you can still eat it. No, don't get up from the table. I don't want you chewing and walking. I'd rather you sit at the chair. Like, okay, I know it sounds like I'm a nag. I probably am. But what's happening there? What am I feeling, right? I want her to be safe. I don't want her to choke. I don't want her to hit her head without a helmet. I want her to be all right. Well, that's what I want, right? Well, one day, I'm downstairs in the basement doing something. I was playing video games, and because I'm cool, and I'm doing my thing. I'm so cool. I'm wearing this cool headset with a microphone. I'm talking to my other friends who are 40 and playing video games because we're cool. What's so funny? And all of a sudden I hear, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I rip the headset off and I run over to her. And literally the first thing I say to her is, were you holding the handrail? Because I'm a phenomenal dad. And I have a parenting class that you should all sign up for. It'll tell you how to yell at your kids when they're hurt. It's the best. Okay? So now my kid who's hurt and, stunned, like the first thing she gets from her father isn't like, oh my gosh, baby girl, are you okay? It's like, did you follow my rules? And then I discover she has food in her mouth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and you're not wearing a helmet either. Literally, my desire for her safety, for her good, came out in this dumb guy over here yelling at her. What did she need here? Yelling? Discipline? A reminder of the rules? No, of course not. She needed a dad to pick her up and hold her and then yell at her later. But this desire came out in a really, really bad way. And I know this happens to all of us. Maybe not so much with our kids. Hopefully not. But this does happen. This happens in the arena of work and family balance. I'm sure most people here want to be good providers, either for themselves, for their spouse, for their children, whoever it might be. So we go into this idea of work thinking, I want to make sure they never have to do without. So I'm going to work. But then something happens. It pushes us in this direction of working too much, where sometimes we can be accused of being either greedy or workaholics. But in our minds, we're thinking, no, this is good. I just want to be a good provider. I just want them to be taken care of. And eventually it can get to a point where the people we love that we're trying to provide for, they would trade the money for more of our presence, for more time with us. Somehow this good notion of providing ends up hurting the people we care about. Sometimes we go into relationships or the idea of a long-term commitment kind of thing, and our hope and our desire is for partnership. And what happens sometimes is people trade physical intimacy for a sense of commitment, and it takes us into a place where we don't want to be, where we don't want to go. But if you asked, well, how come this is happening? It started here. It started with a wholesome, truly good desire, but it ends up taking us and doing things, having us do things that we don't necessarily want to do. Even simple things like wanting a clean and orderly and neat household, which is a noble thing, can sometimes take us to a place where it's not fun for the other people that live there, because we can end up being more concerned about how clean things are than the people enjoying the house. The house isn't serving the people are serving the cleanliness of the house. It's a wholesome idea, but it's executed in a bad way. It comes out in a bad manner. The question we have to ask ourselves when it comes to these things, when it comes to being a parent, a person in a relationship, taking care of our finances, our lives, whatever it might be, we have to ask this question: is there a better way to express this desire? And fortunately, we see this take place in the life of Moses. Moses, as you may know, he becomes the rescuer for all of Israel. But it didn't start that way. He ended his time in Egypt as a murderer, and then he was on the run. He was a fugitive, and sadly, he was totally powerless at that point to help his fellow Israelites. He couldn't do anything. He was on the run from Pharaoh. And years passed, decades passed. He became a shepherd. He was just a guy taking care of sheep. That's who he was. And something changed in his life. And God spoke to him for the first time, like directly to him. Maybe you know this story about the burning bush where there was this shrub or this bush on fire, but the fire wasn't consuming the branches or the leaves. And God spoke to him from this. And God calls him and says, called him from within the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." And he responded and said, "Here I am." And they have this long conversation when he's like, "Listen, I have not forgotten my people, but I want to take you. I want to use what you have, that desire for the good of your people, that good thing that's within you. It ended poorly, but I'm going to use it, and I'm going to take that desire and transform it." And this is what he says. "So now go. I am sending you back to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." And so, truthfully, Moses is very hesitant, probably because he was scared of being killed, but he goes back and forth with God. He's like, "Are you sure it's me? Are you sure you can use me? Are you sure?" And finally he's like, "Just go already." And he goes, and then several chapters later, this is like 9 chapters in the book of Exodus, literally, Pharaoh gets to the point where he's like, "I don't want these people around anymore. Take all of Israel and leave." And Moses is the hero. He's the deliverer. He's the guy who once had a desire for the good of his people, which led to murder. His desire for the good of his own people now led to the freedom of his own people. That's who he became. But why? What changed? In a word, God got a hold of him. That's not a word, that's many words. But redemption. Redemption is the word. God intervened and said, "Hey, let me take what you feel. Let me take what you want. And let me transform it into something genuinely good and long-lasting, everlasting. You want the good for your people, but it took you to a place where you did not want to go. Submit that desire to me. Give me that desire, and I will turn you into the hero that Israel needs you to be. Not the murderer, not the avenger, not the person who's going to go kill all of Egypt, but I need you to go rescue your people and bring them out." God redeemed Moses, and he wants to do the same for us. God wants to redeem us. He wants to take those desires that you have and transform them. He wants to use the good, wholesome things that you feel that you want to be able to do. He wants to redeem them. He wants me to be a great parent, not one that yells at his hurting kid. But what I need to do in that moment is think, is there a better way? What would God have me do? How can I power down me and allow God to use me to love my kid? Rather than yelling, maybe I can embrace. Maybe down the line, I can connect the dots for her and say, "Hey, remember all those times I reminded you of being safe? That's what I want for you. Do you see now how that didn't play out? And she's 4. She probably has no idea what I'm talking about. But when you think of your relationships and what you desire for connection, for partnership, for intimacy, rather than being tempted to trade physical intimacy for a sense of commitment, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's something God wants you to bring to him so that he could redeem that desire and transform your future. Maybe when you think of work and family life balance and the people that you want to provide desperately for, maybe there's a healthier way to go about it. And maybe it feels like it's gone too far, like you've already done the damage. I don't think that's the case. When you look at the life of Moses, this guy was literally a murderer. Pharaoh wanted him dead, but God was able to use him to make an incredible difference. What is it for you? What is God bringing to mind right now that you think, that you're feeling like, this is an area I need to lay down? Because here's the thing. At the moment, at this current moment, you might feel like a villain, right? You might feel like Moses felt, like he was no help at all to Israel. In fact, it was worse than that. He was a murderer and a fugitive. He was long, long gone. There's times where I feel like I'm the villain, right? Like I'm no help to my daughter. There's times where you feel like you're not helping yourself or you're not helping the people that you love, that you want to provide for, that you want to care for. But if we choose, maybe we don't need a burning fire bush moment, but God's like, there's an invitation for you every day to submit, to give it a shot, to let him redeem your desires. And hopefully, if we do that, perhaps, maybe not in the same way Moses was, but perhaps we can become a hero to the people we love.